serious?
I can't even get mad for this review. Seriously, I honestly can't. I mean, I know you were expecting me to go into this review and make like a 22-minute long rant like I did with Justice League about how much this movie sucks. I want it to burn in hell. This is one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my entire life. No, not this time, because what I just saw was truly mesmerizing. And no, it was not in a good way. Sony, you have tried so many times to make a cinematic universe. So far this decade, you failed twice with 2016's female version of Ghostbusters and The Dark Tower. And to some certain extent, the Emoji Movie, and that was a kid's film. But I do know for one thing, you're still trying to not get rid of that Spider-Man license. Seriously. The only time you did something very good with Spider-Man was with the first two movies made by a director who knew exactly what he was doing. But all of a sudden, once those first two movies were made, you got a little bit of an idea inside of your head. They have came up with the idea of making a solo movie of one of the most popular characters in the Spider-Man universe. That being Venom. Venom, also known as Eddie Brock, is one of the most beloved characters of the Spider-Man universe and has been praised by friends not only because of the fact that he looks cool, but because of his very intense rivalry with Spider-Man in Peter Parker, and because of his unique, interesting backstory. Sony has tried to make a couple appearances of the Venom character, but however, that didn't work out so well. One of which was having him be one of the villains in Spider-Man 3, a movie that could have potentially been a perfect conclusion to the Spider-Man story. However, what we got instead was a movie ruined by studio interference and is a disappointment in every sense of the word. And it was mostly because of the fact that Sam Raimi didn't even want the character in the movie to begin with. And because of that decision, turns out it was a sign for the foreseeable future. Sam Raimi left the Spider-Man franchise after controversial arguments with Sony. Spider-Man 4 was then cancelled and then turned into a remake of the first Spider-Man movie in The Amazing Spider-Man. Sony made the same mistakes that Spider-Man 3 made by adding too many villains in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The rights were then given to Marvel, even though Sony has complete control of the character. And then, after so many long years, they finally got the solo movie that they have always wanted to make, in the form of Venom. A Spider-Man spin-off movie without Spider-Man or even the mention of him, that features Oscar-nominated actors like Tom Hardy, Michelle Williams, and Riz Ahmed, who we recently seen him in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story as the main villain. So, how did it turn out? Well, based upon my introduction, I can definitely say this. Sony, I knew it was gonna be bad, but you, my friend, have taken it to a whole nother level of bad. I mean, wow. Now, once again, I can't even get mad in this movie because this movie, while it is a total misfire in every sense of the word, it is so fascinating that this film actually exists. And why am I like this? Well, let's talk about this turd in the wind. In this movie, Venom stars Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock, an extraordinary hotshot investigative journalist who, unfortunately, has his life ruined because he got fired from his job, had his girlfriend break up with him, played by Michelle Williams, simply for going on a hunch without any kind of source. And the hunch that he is still not giving up on is that Carlton Drake, played by Riz Ahmed, is doing some dastardly undercover schemes that ultimately have to do with the symbiotes that were recently found in a crashed ship in the middle of Malaysia. While Tom Hardy is still on the hunt, snooping around to figure out what Carlton Drake's plan is, he gets attacked by a test subject that infects him with a symbiote. That symbiote, of course, being Venom. When he has the symbiote inside him, Venom starts talking to him in his own mind, while also implying that they can kind of work together to face off their enemies. And so it's up to Eddie Brock to not only handle the symbiote, but to stop Carlton Drake's plan once and for all. So, where do we exactly start? Well, we can definitely start with the characters and the actors. The characters are thinly written, and the acting is so godly atrocious. Let's start off with Eddie Brock, of course, played by Tom Hardy. Now, here's the thing. Tom Hardy is a great actor. I loved him in Mad Max Fury Road. I loved him in Warrior. I think he's a very good actor in The Revenant. But his character in this movie is so unrelatable and completely unlikable. One of the things that you do not like about Eddie Brock's character is that he gets fired, and deservingly so, on his own job as a journalist. Why? Because of the things he does that cost his job. Before going to interview Carlton Drake about the Life Foundation, he logs onto his girlfriend's account on her own computer and looks up confidential documents about the case that happened in Malaysia, and then when it comes to that day, he completely botches the interview. Those are the kinds of things he does in this whole movie that make you completely despise him. However, his performance is another story, because when Venom shows up, his performance is undescribable. His acting in this movie is so bizarre and out of left field that when he does something that really wasn't supposed to be funny in his acting, is something that can only rival Nicolas Cage's performance in the Ghost Rider movies. For example, one of the scenes that happens is that Tom Hardy goes over to his girlfriend and her new boyfriend, and he tries to explain to her that there was a parasite stuck inside of his body. And they're like at this fine and dine 4-star restaurant. And whenever Venom is requiring food inside of his mind, he starts eating food like a madman, and at one point, he then goes into a lobster tub, lays in there like it's a jacuzzi, and then goes into one of the lobsters and bites its head off and continues eating it. I was snickering almost throughout his whole performance. It's one of those performances that are so bad and crazy that it's just hilarious. However, there are some performances that aren't good whatsoever. Michelle Williams, who is an Oscar-nominated actress, is in this movie, and she is god-awful. Her performance is so wooden and stiff, and not only that, but her character is so superfluous to the plot, and her chemistry with Tom Hardy is non-existent in this movie. It's the kind of chemistry that makes you feel like that the actors are just basically staring at each other going, yeah, I know this movie is freaking horrible, but you know what? Let's just get through this together. Now, I understand that Riz Ahmed, who we've recently seen in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, is a very good actor. But Riz Ahmed in this movie couldn't be any more miscasted in this, and his character of Carlton Drake gets reduced down to a non-threatening bad guy archetype whose plan, by the way, doesn't make any sense. One of the things he believes is that mankind is futile, and one of the best ways to live or survive is alien colonization. So we would basically have to put these symbiotes inside of ourselves and just go off into space or... Once again, I'm trying to make this thing make sense. I can't. Believe me, neither does the movie. And along with the characters, the development is also non-existent. There's no sense of arc, there's no sense of relationship that really feels natural because it just really feels scripted and forced. Especially, and this is something that people defended, the relationship between Venom and Eddie Brock. Throughout this whole movie, we just see these characters basically do nothing for more than 20 or minutes so of screen time. Basically share annoying and unfunny banter back and forth with each other. One of the running gags being that Venom doesn't like it when people call him Parasite. And that joke goes on forever. And because of that, we don't get to fully invest in these characters or care about them in their situations. But here's another reason why the character development is non-existent at all. Once you see Venom, he is incredibly menacing, just basically talking like, I don't know, Keith David on Reverb, where Venom is doing nothing but just making condescending remarks at Eddie, basically calling him a loser, while also using him to murder people. And then all of a sudden, 30 minutes later, he has a change of heart and he wants to be a wisecracking anti-hero to save the day? And the best possible reasoning for them teaming up? It's because they're both losers. No, that's it. They are both losers. Like, this just happens without any kind of logical reasoning or efficient character development. Venom in Spider-Man 3 has more efficient motivation than Venom does in his own feature film. The reason being is because Eddie Brock in Spider-Man 3, who was played by Topher Grace, has legitimate reasonings to get back at one person. Peter Parker. And it's because of the fact that in Eddie's point of view, in every single turn in life, Peter Parker ruined his life. He made him look utterly pathetic. And so because of that, the symbiote in him gets revenge on him. In Venom, Spider-Man doesn't exist or is even mentioned, so he has no sense of motivation except for trying to bite people's heads off and be monstrous. And I get that Eddie Brock and Venom kind of team up because they're both losers technically, but this just comes out of nowhere for no particular reason other than the climax, and it just happens completely abruptly. And speaking of monstrous, the dialogue is repulsive. Repulsive in a way where every single line in this movie is cringeworthy or written to the laziest degree. You cannot help but feel sorry for these Oscar-nominated actors like Michelle Williams and Tom Hardy, who are basically suffering through this movie, trying to read lines like this with complete and utter sincerity. My legs, they were broken. Now they're not. Yep, he's definitely got a parasite straight up the ass. I'm so sorry about Venom. Have a nice life. And of course, this movie's version of You're Tearing Me Apart, Lisa.
Like a turd in the wind.
Well, the dialogue is pretty terrible, the character motivations aren't there, and the acting is completely atrocious. How are the action scenes? Look, I understand that anybody anticipating to see this movie really wants to have very good action and very good gore in a Venom movie like this. However, the action scenes are sporadically staged and clumsily filmed. As these action scenes are happening, you can barely tell what is going on and who is fighting who. Mostly because of the fact that this film was obviously hacked down to a PG-13 rating, which means that most of the fight scenes are compiled of poor cinematography, clunky editing where there is quick cuts every single second, and I obviously know what you're thinking, just wait for the extended cut. But you know what? Regardless of what rating it is, even if it was an R rating, it still wouldn't have helped the story, the characters, the plot, and the dialogue. The final fight in this movie honestly feels like the poor man's horribly edited version of the Incredible Hulk and the Abomination fight in the Incredible Hulk. It is a CGI fest where two computer-generated characters are smashing into one another, and it's something that adds little to no suspense in the situation, and whenever there are moments where they're merging within each other, you can barely even tell who is who. The editing is also in disarray. Like, there are some moments that really don't flow naturally. Like, for example, Eddie Brock in the middle of daylight walks into a convenience store, and when he walks out, it is the middle of the night. And the tone is also all over the place. At one moment, the movie turns into a very dark thriller, where Venom is just basically biting people's heads off in almost very violent fashion. And then at other points, it basically becomes a buddy comedy where the characters are sharing banter back and forth between each other. And this is after Eddie Brock maliciously kills someone. And speaking of Venom, the visual effects itself are abysmally noticeable. When Venom actually transforms into Venom for the first time, or when you're basically watching him on screen, he looks like a combination between black tar and expired whipped cream. He doesn't look in the least bit good, and also the symbiotes, when you see them come out of the person's body being still attached and talking to them straight in their face, it honestly looks like people are looking at a tennis ball this whole time. And also, I gotta talk about this, the mid-credits scene. Oh my god. The mid-credits scene is so bad that it not only contained one of the best actors working today wearing one of the worst wigs I have ever seen, but when he said a pun that had to do with a certain character, I just couldn't help but go, no, 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 no. Oh my god, Sony. You jumped the shark on this one. Guys, Venom is an atrocity, but also in an intriguing sense. This is a movie created by a studio with no heart or passion being put into it, and yet the results are a fascinating display. Everything about Venom is a total colossal embarrassment. However, the film is so incredibly shocking that it has to be seen to be believed. If you are a person who loves analyzing bad movies, go see Venom. I'm not even kidding. Venom is an absolute train wreck from start to finish, with its completely generic story that would even hold up to 1989 standards, one-dimensional characters, atrocious acting, non-existent character development, appalling dialogue, clumsy filmed action scenes, janky, disjointed editing, abysmal visual effects, and a mid-credits scene that completely jumps the shark for this potential franchise. Venom undoubtedly, without question, gets a 0 out of 5. Alright guys, that is my review of Venom. Comment below, let me know what you thought about the movie. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And also, if you would like to see more reviews or even rants like this, be sure to subscribe for more. My name is Luke Nukem, and Venom really is a turd in the wind.